Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Think, Engage, Thrive, where we bring you some of the greatest entrepreneurs that we can find to tell their story about startups and about what they know. And tonight, we've got a great one, Frederick Vallaeys. He is the founder or the co-founder of Optmyzr, which is a PPC optimization software. But more importantly, and anybody who has been doing PPC for a long time and watched the early Google videos that were on YouTube, you're going to know this guy. I did the first time I saw him, and it cracks me up because I I loved watching those videos, and it wasn't so much. Certainly the information was important, but the way that he delivered it, I thought was fantastic. And he's just a knowledgeable guy, an innovator in the whole world of PPC. When you hear his story, you're going to be amazed. I mean, we're talking about somebody who was one of the earliest employees at Google, who made some of the decisions or came up with some of the ideas for some of the things that we know to be true about Google AdWords, Q score, and and things along these lines. So tonight we're going to get a chance to talk to him, and I'm really excited because, again, I don't know the man as much. I met him, via video, but I know him from watching these videos, and it was just I loved it. It was years ago, right? Anybody who's doing it watched these videos years ago, and so I guarantee you're going to recognize him when you see him. But we're going to bring him in, and we're going to talk to him about his story and about how he became one of the earliest Google employees and some of the innovations. Again, conversion tracking, quality score, things like this that he had a hand in doing, which I just think is unto itself a great feat, because those things are all anybody who's doing e-commerce, anybody who's running ads, anybody who's doing anything with PPC knows what those pieces are all about. And to have the guy who was really there at the infancy of it all, I think is phenomenal. So let's bring him in and let's talk to him and hear what he has to say. A great entrepreneur, a great innovator, and so let's let's.
Hey, Phil.
How you doing? I'm so
Good.
happy to have you on the show. I really
Yeah,
am.
what an amazing intro. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's true though. I was thinking, I was explaining it to my a couple of people that work with me, and I said, if you remember, and some of them do, I said, if you remember when we had a shaving company at the time, and we were trying to improve our PPC, and we would just watch the videos in the office. And you were explaining, I think they were like 50 minutes or 55 minutes. And you were explaining all these pieces to it. And it was just, so we got to know you from watching these videos, so to speak. So
Yeah, no, it's funny because I was sort of doing the influencer thing before that was a thing, and video before everybody was doing video, but it was all thanks to Google. And yeah, it was just really fun because I got this evangelist role. I basically made it up myself because Google really needed someone who was like a spokesperson for ads, and who could connect the dots between what products they were building and how people would actually use it for advertising. And so I basically stamped my ticket to travel the world, get to meet a lot of really cool advertisers, and yeah, and eventually that led to what I'm doing now.
yeah, I think one of the things that struck me, because I used to watch those videos, and one of the things that struck me was that you simplified it essentially when you were explaining it, because I think some people were, back in the early days, Google was very difficult to if you didn't know what you were doing and you didn't pay attention, it was sort of difficult to make sure that you were optimizing it correctly. And so watching those videos really, I would say, saved us a lot of money. Not number one, number two, made us better advertisers. So thanks for that.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad it helped.
So I think that's an interesting story. Can you share that story about how that whole thing transpired, how you became one of Google's earliest employees, how you really got involved in that whole piece about being an evangelist and really becoming almost the face of Google PPC for a while?
Yeah. Well, so I went to Stanford. I got my undergraduate degree there. And a lot of the early Googlers, they came out of Stanford. The Marissa Mayer connection, she was a TA in the CS classes. And so one of the teams at Google in the early days was called the maximization team. These
Yeah.
optimizers, they call them maximizers in the early days. And this one guy, Max, actually, it was named after Max. Okay, so this guy named Max, who was running the maximization team, he just had a knack for going to a Stanford network and finding new employees for Google and getting the referral bonuses. And so I had just lost my job in the dot-com bubble bursting. This was like around 2002. And so I was looking at what to do next. So this guy, Max, reaches out and he's like, hey, we got a position at Google. And I'm like, yeah, I've kind of heard of the company, but I don't really get it. The whole search page looks a little weird. There's just a search bar and nothing else. Like, shouldn't there be sports scores and news and all of these other things? So the bulb hadn't quite gone off for me yet, but I'm like, okay, fine, I'll talk to you, Max. And he's like, well, your role would be to come in and review ads. And I'm like, wait, what now? Like, I have an electrical engineering degree from Stanford. I used to be an engineer in my last role, and you want me to review ads? I was like, no, thank you. But if something better comes up, give me a call back. So a couple of months later, he calls back. He's like, well, actually, this whole AdWords thing, we want to bring it to the Dutch market, and we need someone who speaks Dutch. And I saw that you're originally from Belgium, so you speak Flemish, which is the same as Dutch. I was like, okay, that sounds a bit more interesting. Like it seems like there's a career path there. And I'd sort of like picked up on the fact by that point that Google was on this trajectory to be amazing. I was like, okay, I'll come in. And so that was, it was one building in Mountain View. It's called Building Zero. The lobby conference room is called the I'm Feeling Lucky Lounge. And they just stuck me and 5 other people in there, and we were basically reviewing ads. And I made it through the program. I didn't mess up too many reviews. And so I got a full-time position. And but really what I enjoyed was working with these advertisers and understanding how they were making money. And once I got a hang of it and I understood like there's big affiliates making a lot of money and spending a lot of money on Google ads, I was like, ooh, I can probably do this too. I can sign up for a few affiliate programs. And so I became the biggest affiliate for eBay in the Netherlands. And so the next thing you know, I'm invited to go and speak at their conference. My boss at the time was Sheryl Sandberg. And so I go to her, I'm like, hey, it's kind of weird. I work for Google, but I'm also a big advertiser. Like, can I go to eBay? She's like, oh yeah, that's fantastic. You're like a poster child or a poster boy for how this advertising system really works and it helps grow businesses. So go for it. Go and talk to them. I ended up not going, but I ended up doing a lot of other speeches. And so, where executives like Sheryl would be really comfortable giving a great talk, they weren't always that comfortable answering questions about where the rubber meets the road and like the things that advertisers actually wanted to know about the details. And so I stepped in, I was answering those questions, and I was like, yeah, I love this and I want to do more of it. So I turned that into an evangelist role, which was like hybrid marketing, PR, product, support, touching a little bit of everything. And it was really fun. And that's what I did at Google for about 10 years.
Yeah.
Also in the beginning, I did play hockey with Sergey, and Larry came to my parties. We got those connections too, but yeah, it was fun times.
That's pretty amazing. About being in the right, really in the right place at the right time in the infancy of something, to watch Google go really from something small to, what it is today. But
Yeah.
when you say when you first started, you were reviewing ads. So reviewing ads before they went up, is that what you're saying? Or
Yeah. So, this has been around now for 2 decades, 1998, basically. So a lot of people probably don't know the early stories there, but yeah. So when an ad was submitted in the very early days of Google, they would just post it up on the Google website because it didn't matter. They were not a big company. They didn't have that much revenue. If there was an inappropriate ad that surfaced, it was like, well, fine, we'll notice it. Somebody will complain. We'll just take it down. So it was a very reactive approach to taking stuff down and ensuring quality. But then they signed the deal with AOL at the time, which was like a $50 million guaranteed revenue. And that was huge for Google at the time, like, because again, they didn't have significant revenue or any profits of any sort. But part of the deal with AOL was that the ads had to be reviewed because AOL is a very family safe brand, and they could not afford to have an explicit ad or an ad for controversial products appear on their pages. And so now we had to retroactively go in and review all of the ads that existed in the Google system, everything that had been submitted up until the AOL deal, and anything new that was submitted. And now, of course, because AOL was coming in, Google was gaining a lot of momentum, and more advertisers are starting to pump in more keywords. And so it was literally these ad groups where you'd put in, 1,000 keywords. Sometimes you were just dictionary dumping. You put in 1,000 keywords and you put in your ad, and then you do that, 10,000 times. And so all of these ads had to be reviewed, and automation just didn't exist really. So this all went through humans, and I was one of those humans who my nightmares have stopped. But I can tell you when it was those days, like we would literally dream of keywords and reviewing ads. It was crazy.
I was going to say I couldn't imagine manually reviewing all those ads that were being pushed by advertisers. That must have been tedious. So then you went on and you started pioneering things like quality score, conversion rate optimization. How did that whole piece happen? I mean, they listened, obviously they paid attention to what you were saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so that was the thing, right? So when I was on the support team building this whole Dutch organization and the Dutch AdWords, we were subdivided in tiers, and I was also dealing with the tier 7, 8 United States customers, and so that was like one of the lower tiers. But one day we have a team meeting, and it's the guys from tier 1, like the big spenders. We're going to get to talk to them, and so one of the questions that gets asked is like, who are these big advertisers? And so one of my friends now, he's like, oh yeah, these are like mega affiliates and this and that. And that's really when I picked up on the fact that, well, if they're spending $30,000 a month, by the way, that's what it took back in the day. In the beginning of Google Ads, it was like $30,000 a month made you like a top tier advertiser. That's not the case anymore, right? But it gives you perspective. But I was like, well, if they're spending $30,000 a month, like they must be making a significant amount to, you're not just putting that in for no return. I was like, okay, let me do this too. But then AdWords was very rudimentary at the time. And so they didn't have search terms reporting. So you would choose the keyword, and that was it. And then was no conversion tracking. And because I have an engineering degree, I was like, well, I can figure this out. I can write a little JavaScript code, and I can put that on my landing page, and I can sort of get the feedback loop complete. So when eBay tells me there's a conversion, they will give me like this numerical ID, and I can tie that back into what the original click was from Google. And so basically I built my own conversion tracking system. And then on top of that, I was like, okay, well, now I can also see what did the user actually type into the search box. So it's not just my keyword, but it's the search term. And again, this is simple stuff that everybody does nowadays, but back then it just didn't exist. And I was building these things. And then, the product teams at Google, they knew that advertisers were doing this, and now here they had a resource who was internal to Google who was also doing it, who kind of could explain why advertisers do it, what is it they really need. And so I just saw an opportunity to go and be like an internal consultant to the product teams. And so when it came to conversion tracking, I went in and I gave my spiel about this is what we needed to do, this is how it should work, and then they built it. And then later on, I was on the team that created the Google Ads editor, AdWords editor back then. But like the original 6 people that built this bulk tool, because we were also starting to see that advertisers, they just had thousands upon thousands of keywords and huge numbers of ad groups and campaigns. And they were managing this through spreadsheets. And then, now they have this spreadsheet and they'd have to figure out a way to bring it into Google Ads. And that was all complicated, and it was prone to breaking through the automations that they had built. So we're like, why don't we build a tool that like has this whole bulk capability and make it easy and put the error messages right there in that tool. So that was the ads editor. And then quality score. So quality score is a relatively newer thing, because in the very early days of Google, it was all about relevance, right? And so what they would look at in the very early days was literally me looking at your keyword and making a judgment decision about whether that was relevant enough to your landing page and your ad. If I didn't think it was, when I say I mean me and the people reviewing ads, but we had the power to just disapprove it for relevance issues. And then Google said, well, let's actually look at how people are voting, users are voting, because every time we show the ad, we can measure how often somebody clicks on the ad. So the click-through rate, that's going to become the benchmark. So 0.5% click-through rate, that's the minimum. If you can't meet that, you're going to get automatically now disapproved for relevance. And that kept evolving over time into what is now called quality score. But just like explaining that to advertisers, and obviously it was contentious, right? Because sometimes, I mean, there was this one story where it was Netflix, and Netflix, we told them that the keyword Netflix, their own brand name, had a low quality score, and hence at one stage they couldn't advertise on it because we didn't think it was a good enough keyword. Now, why is that? Well, it's actually because they had really great organic results. So everybody was clicking on the organic listing. And so the CTR of the ad looked really pathetic. And so, again, could be debated, like legitimately it wasn't getting a lot of traction, but also legitimately it is their brand. So it is kind of relevant to their business, right? But so these were the situations that we'd get into, and we'd have to explain it, and we have to evolve the system to really do the right thing in all situations. So that was a big project, long project, but it was very fun.
Yeah. So you were actually an advertiser on your own system at the same time as you were working for Google. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. So I started. So I'd been advertising. I started in '98. I started advertising on GoTo. So GoTo was like a precursor to Google CPC system. So I was doing that, but I wasn't very successful. I mean, I was successful enough to make like a couple $100 here and there, but it wasn't until I came to Google that I saw how to scale it through like conversion tracking, search terms management, and all of these other things. And then I actually became a tier 1 advertiser. So I was working on the team building AdWords, but I also had my own dedicated account rep who was like 2 seats over from me. And I remember one time I'd invited him over to the campus for dinner. So he shows up at 6 p.m. and I'm like, I still have these like ads to review or whatever it was. So I just asked my account rep to handle it so I could go get dinner.
That's fun. And they had no problem with the fact that you were advertising as well as working for the company? I guess.
No, and again, like I said, I mean, so Sheryl Sandberg, she sort of very early days saw this as a great example that this whole advertising system worked. Now, later on, there were situations where people with internal knowledge of some systems were basically gaming the system, and that came into play much more on the AdSense side. So once Google had a publisher network, now what people started doing, and that was like they put the kibosh on that pretty quickly, but because they could look in the ad systems and know how much somebody was willing to pay for a click, and they also knew how much, so they basically would build publisher pages that ran AdSense ads, and they would arbitrage the spread, and they'd make money that way. But yeah, for me, no, it wasn't about that. Like, I mean, I obviously never looked at competitor bids and all of that. I just ran it straight off of like knowing how much money would I make. And so again, like ROAS bidding, return on ad spend bidding, cost per acquisition bidding, none of these bidding automations existed, but I figured out how to look at my data and know how much I could afford on a cost per click basis. And I knew my average conversion rate. And I was involved in buying Google Analytics as well, so Urchin. And that was really about making that sort of data, that sort of power accessible to anyone. And that's where, there was a product manager, Wesley Chen, who'd gone to a conference, and he saw this amazing analytics product that was all hosted in the cloud. And he went to Eric Schmidt and he was like, doesn't it make sense? The more that an advertiser can actually track where the value is coming from, and the fact that it is from Google and specific keywords, like that's going to get them to spend more money with Google, as opposed to having questions and maybe just assuming and making a wrong decision. Right. So Wesley and I were friends. So he brought me along to San Diego to meet the team at Urchin, and then he put me in charge of doing the transition of the support team. So yeah, that was fun. I mean, we bought this small company, and now it's Google Analytics, one of the biggest analytics platforms in the world.
Yeah, I love that. I loved it when Google Analytics first started coming out. I love the analytics side of. That's what I love about e-commerce, because I grew up in the physical store world. I owned stores, and I worked for in the food retail world, and I built one of the first meal sites back in 1998 called greatmeals.com. I mean, it was a different world back then, but anyway, So I grew up in the physical world, and one of the problems that I always had in the physical world is you're making a lot of assumptions. You're always constantly sitting there making assumptions about whether this TV ad did what it was supposed to do, or whether the circular you have, which is a flyer, brought people in or drove sales, or whether this ad did or this. There was really not a lot of tracking, and the advertising companies that we used at the time, always threw out these ethereal numbers of, yeah, it did this, yeah, it did that, but you could never track it. And when we got into e-commerce in the, really in a big way in the early 2000s, um, in the beauty side of it, we started to see the beauty of everything was trackable. Everything was trackable if you knew how to do it. And I loved it because now I wasn't making any guesses. And with one of the brands that we owned, we did television, direct response TV ads, and even those were you had a hard time tracking. I mean, today with OTT, networks, we can do, you know, we can track everything at this point too on television. So I love that whole piece because there's no guessing. I don't have to listen to people tell me, no, you got so many impressions. Impressions don't matter to me as much as tying those impressions to the clicks and to the conversions. So I loved analytics. I still do. And I love heat mapping. I love, I love the reporting that comes out of ads. I love all that. So I, I
Yeah.
would, I could spend my day analyzing those reports, constantly. But now we have some great AI tools that sort of help us analyze those reports very rapidly because there's so much information. I mean, the amount of information coming out of it has expanded so much since we first started that it's almost impossible to do it manually, I think. But
It is, and so, I mean, speaking of AI and sort of the future, I just wrote a post on Search Engine Land this week or last week, so check it out. But it's really about what Google announced at GML, Google Marketing Live, and my point was, well, listen, there's 30 product announcements that Google made, and there's a lot of buzz and attention to those things, but let's focus on what are they actually like portraying as the future of search, the thing that's 5 years out, maybe 3 years out, who knows, right? But it's like Wayne Gretzky said, move to where the puck is going to be,
yeah,
not where the puck is right now.
yeah,
um and so we've been so conditioned to work with keywords and have these specific capabilities of targeting. But when you start to think about a Gen AI world where these devices, and so I brought my glasses here. So these are the Meta glasses, and I got a clear pair, so they don't have prescription in them. But I love wearing these because I wear them into a bookstore, for example, and I look at a book and I'm like, hey, Meta, look at this book and tell me what it's about. And so it gives me a description, right? But it also goes into like this persistent memory of the things that I've seen. So later on I could be like, hey, I was in a bookstore about a week ago and there was this book about blah blah blah, like, can you remind me what it was? And I might actually go and buy it. And so I think we're moving into this world where these devices and this Gen AI, because of its memory, doesn't really need keywords to target an ad, right? Because now I'm kind of like describing what's in that book, and that might not be like the type of keyword I would have typed into a search box in the past, but it can still find what I wanted. And so for advertisers to really start thinking about, like, how do you operate in that sort of paradigm? So it's not about targeting a keyword. It's not about looking at a spreadsheet and understanding the profitability on a keyword by keyword level, but it's about, like, have you fed the machine your correct conversion and profit data? Because like you said, it's not about vanity metrics, like how many impressions, but it's about, did you get clicks at the right price? Did they convert? Did they lead to profit for you? Right. And if you tie all of that together, now you can ask the machine to start showing your ad or promoting your product at the right time for the right price. Even when we've lost all of these targeting mechanisms we've become so conditioned to for the last 20 years.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I do love AI. I do love some of the AI tools that we use. We've been using them for a few years, obviously, to do things like everybody. We build content with it, but and the typical things, we build ads with it. We build content. I'm not a big fan of of the images that come out of it. I think they still look a little too fake, so we don't really do that. But we do. But more importantly, we use it for idea generation because we work with so many different brands that sometimes we get a little stuck on. You need a different view, and I think
You get
that
a writer's block, right? Or
yeah,
whatever they call that for images.
yeah. But the one thing I found this product about a year ago, and I can just put so much data into it, and it will help me on multivariates interpret that data in a very rapid format. So if I want to see how something, just like you said, if I want to see how this key, relating it to the discussion of keywords, how this keyword did in conversions or how this keyword did in clicks and where did it go, and so I can do it in a quick way, which again, it's very difficult to do manually, I think. So I
And
do
that's
like,
so exciting to me is that, you can no longer give the answer of I can't. The answer should be I haven't yet tried to,
yeah,
because, if you're not a data nerd and you don't know statistics, well, that's okay. Go and ask the AI for some suggestions, and then it'll help you write the code. Or if you're not a pro, like I love Google Ad scripts, like totally love them because it helps you automate. But I have the luxury of knowing how to program. But if you don't, you can just literally, again, make a pair of glasses like this, draw something on the whiteboard. You look at it with those glasses, they're like, hey, Meta, look at the whiteboard and write me the script to execute this flowchart. So you don't even have to write bullets anymore. You can just draw something on a board and turn it into a piece of functional automation code.
yeah,
Crazy.
yeah. It is crazy. Well, I'm not a developer. We have developers who work with us, but so to me, it's the development of things, writing code. It's just not sort of how my brain works. What I focus more on, I like to analyze the customer because I see in keywords and I see in behavior and I see in like heat mapping and things like that. I just see something totally different. I look at it in terms of, where, like you said, or like Wayne Gretzky said, I'm trying to figure out where that customer is going to go, where they're going to go next, and I use the data to sort of help me with that because I think keywords, whether it's on Amazon, whether it's on Google or wherever it is, it tells you something about what's happening and what people are thinking about. Amazon, we do a lot of work on Amazon, and Amazon has this brand analytics portion where you can look at search terms and what product ranked for that search term, et cetera. But what I find fascinating is looking at it on a monthly basis and seeing sort of the pattern of what people are thinking about at different times during the year, and what influenced that. So, obviously COVID was an easy one because when COVID hit, you could see all these different things, what people were looking for, which was just panic buying because they,
Mhm.
health and beauty and health and wellness, just panicking. And, in summertime and holidays, but when things happen in the world, you look at what people are searching for and it just tells you something about the consumer. So I like that part of it. I'm not much of a programmer, to be honest.
No, you're right. I mean, I recorded an episode for my podcast, PPC Town Hall, yesterday. Corey Lindholm came on, and he basically showed how he was using generative AI to help him write statistical, like Python code. And he would ingest 3 years of Google Ads data, and it would spit out a seasonality chart. And it would say, like, basically every May, like, you're going to have 12 more conversions than typical versus average. And so you could start to see these patterns. And that's really fascinating, right? Because now you can go in as an agency or as the digital marketing person on the team, and you can go to your boss and um, maybe temper some excitement when it's like, oh, well, May was really good. Well, okay, but May is always really good, right? So maybe it's not the thing we did. Maybe that's just seasonality. Like, let's keep doubling down because June is going to be a lot tougher. But it's like these insights that previously would have been so difficult to get. Now you can go in, you ask the question, and it helps you write the code. It helps you do the statistics. And then to your other example about audiences and like putting your marketing hat on, but like you and me, like I have a perspective on the world. So if you ask me to advertise a certain thing, like I'm always going to look at it through that perspective, and I'm going to try to like broaden my horizons But now you can go to GPT and treat it as an assistant and say, like, what other types of people might look at this and what might motivate them to buy this. And so like, and then somebody else kind of opened my eyes and was like, well, he's got 3 different assistants that help with a statistical task or a script writing task. And he's basically pitting those assistants against each other in some form. So one assistant comes up with a proposed solution, and another assistant has been asked to be more critical, and so tries to poke holes in it. And so what comes out of it is that it's not just like one assistant that's helping you, but it's like you have an army of interns, of like colleagues, and they're all kind of like figuring it out together. And then what they come to you with has been like, actually, it's almost like it's been gone through several product ideation meetings. And when it comes to you, it's like pretty fully baked. So I
Wow.
was like, that's amazing.
And this was on your podcast yesterday?
Yeah, we recorded that yesterday. It's going to be, I think we're going to launch it next week.
Oh, I have
But
to
but
watch.
it's PPC Town Hall, so people want to see it, they can just subscribe and you'll get that episode soon.
Yeah, I have to watch that. I'm interested in seeing how he does that whole piece, because that would just blow my mind, I think.
Yeah.
You know. So let's get on to your books, because you've written a couple of books, and one of them you wrote with, marketing in the AI, digital marketing in the AI world. And they're both fairly new, right?
Well, the digital marketing in an AI world, I think I started writing it in 2017, was published in
Oh, really?
2019. So it's quite old. And the funny thing about that book is that it wasn't about generative AI, but it was about machine learning and how bid automation is working, and how, if you pick a broad match keyword, Google basically uses machine learning to figure out what might be semantically related queries. And it does like vectors and all of these things that really drive generative AI. But this was before ChatGPT had come out, but it's still super relevant. It's just like a different flavor of AI.
Yeah,
But all of the key points, I think, are still there.
yeah, that's great. I have to. I didn't read it, but I was interested in looking at it. But I'm glad you clarified that. And so, are both of these books sort of older, or?
No, the other one was a 2020 book. So it's Unlevel the Playing Field. And so the premise of Unlevel the Playing Field is that Google and the ad engines, they keep adding this technology and this automation to make it easy for anyone to get average or good enough results in digital marketing. And so these things are frustrating to people watching a show like this who want to do better than average, and they want control. And so what that book is about is, how do you take back some of the key things that unlevel the playing field back in your favor, right? So if you're a digital marketing professional, what can you do despite all of this automated stuff that's mostly running itself? Like, what inputs can you give to still make it do better for you than for your competition?
Yeah, that makes sense, because it does get a little frustrating when not just on Google, but on all the advertising platforms, where you've lost a bit of control, and they're trying to lead you down this path of, just do this, and
Yeah.
you can you can do better. But so
And the thing is,
yeah.
I mean, I'll give away the secret here, but it's not rocket science. And Google, so when they did their GML event a couple of weeks ago, there was one slide and it said 50% of advertisers do not give their first party data to Google. They don't activate first party data in Google Ads. And when you think about first party data, that's often just a connection to a CRM. Because if you're collecting leads on your landing page, well, that's somebody, maybe a bot, that filled out that page for you. That's not a good lead, right?
Right.
Your first party sales data that comes out of your CRM that says, okay, these were the good leads that led to sales, these are the poor ones. Just giving that to Google, like, that is fundamentally what the machine learning system needs to do a better job. It's garbage in, garbage out. If you give it garbage leads and you say, like, these garbage leads are quote unquote conversions, get me more conversions. Well, what do you think the machine's going to do? It's going to find you more of that junk that doesn't matter, that doesn't drive actual revenue or profit. So, and again, it's just shocking. 50% of advertisers don't give Google good data. That is your number one thing you can do to make it work better.
I'm gonna. We're dealing with that right now with a client, and it's driving us crazy, because they have seriously, they have this garbage data in their CRM, and it's affecting everything. And we're trying to explain to them that, you may have 100,000, leads in here, but there's only really 30,000 that are good. The rest of this is garbage. Let me show you why. And they're so afraid to get rid of the 70,000 because it will, that number from 100,000 to 30,000, they feel like it's devastating. But it's true. You always, I mean, as a marketer, it's good form to always have, your lists in your CRM or wherever you have them to be clean, because it is true. Even on, I'll give you another example. This other client has somebody along the way bought 20,000 followers on one of the social media accounts. And so then you say, okay, if you try and use this, right? You know, Meta is going to look at this and say, okay, well, here's the profile of your customer or your follower, and your follower lives in, Southeast Asia, and when really it's
Yeah.
not true. And so, and you explain to people that, why you can't do that. You can't buy lists. You can't buy followers. It just gives you it skews everything in today's environment, I think, because your ads are not going to be optimized, because Facebook Meta is going to look at that information. Google is going to look at the information, like you said, in your CRM, which is, if it's 70% of it is garbage, then you're going to be showing ads to garbage. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's critical.
And that second example is crazy, right? I mean, that's just almost bad behavior. Like, you shouldn't be buying fake followers. The first example, I mean, that's one that we see a little bit more often, where business has been running a certain way, and it's very hard to get them to convince them to do it a different way. But one of the nice things there with Google Ads is that you don't have to get them to change the whole CRM. You could literally put a layer on top of the CRM that filters out and says, okay,
Yeah.
these are the ones that we're going to continue sending to Google as an indicator of high quality leads. And even that doesn't have to be perfect, because a lot of people then just get stuck on the fact that, well, it's not exactly correct. Like, how do we identify like the right lead, the right conversion? Because not everything, I mean, so you have long sales cycles, and sometimes it's too long and you can't feed it back to Google before the window closes. And then people just get stuck, right? But really what you should ask them is, even directionally, like, can we say that this lead was slightly better than that lead? And what about it was it? Like you said, Southeast Asia, maybe not your best market. So, okay, we'll still send it to Google, but we'll say it's a little bit less valuable than these leads that came from North America. And now all things being equal, Google's going to say, oh, well, then let me choose to spend money on the lead from North America, because that seems to be what Phil and team prefer. And so again, and then you can iterate, right? So, and then you start evolving, and eventually you get to the right place, but you don't have to expect getting there on day one.
Yeah. Well, some of the new CRMs, one that we started looking at not too long ago, sort of takes all those leads and ranks them. And so if you are sending that to Google, it's sort of ranking this is a top lead, this is not such a good one, and these are not so good. And that, I think solves that problem. But some of the old CRMs that are out there are just still, it's just a
Well,
path.
and honestly, they're hard to manage, right? Like, I mean, don't want to say anything bad about Salesforce, but it being the gold standard. I mean, sure, if you're a big company, but if you're a mid-sized company and you're a little bit constrained on resources, I mean, good luck getting Salesforce set up correctly
Yeah.
right from the get-go. And so look at these other solutions that may not have all the bells and whistles, and they're not going to be fully customizable, but they may very well address the need that you have in the shorter term. And shameless plug here, but if you have HubSpot set up and you need some help bringing the right data into Google Ads, that's what Optmyzr is, one of the many things we can help you with, my company, right? So look to agencies, software vendors, like this is what we do for a living. We're happy to help you, and it's not necessarily going to cost you all that much money. And just the amount of money you invest, it's going to pay itself back tenfold in terms of no longer spending money on junk leads from Google or Facebook.
Yeah, which is my next question. Let's talk about Optmyzr. That requires because you're the co-founder of it, and what maybe explain it. Give it a quick, a quick 1 or 2 minute explanation of what it is and how people use it the best.
Yeah, so I mean, Optmyzr is the tool that's going to help save you time by being more efficient as a digital marketer. So our mission is to give you back your time so you can have your weekend, you can spend time with your family, you can do the things you love doing. I know you love doing digital marketing, right? But there's probably other things as well. And so really we look at helping you with automation, helping with reporting, helping with data integration. And the name is Optmyzr. So it really came from the philosophy that a lot of money is being spent in Google Ads. We can help you optimize that, make that spend more efficient. So you get better results. And so it could be simple things like finding negative keywords, new keywords to target, attaching better audiences, A/B testing your ads, finding landing pages that are maybe overspending, not converting, all of this stuff like we help you do. And so lately we've shifted a little bit more to what we call PPC insurance. Again, because you're spending so much money on PPC and so much of it has become automated by Google and by the ad platforms. We are that trusted third party that oversees and tells you if something's going a little bit strange, right? And it gives you an alert. And either you just take that alert and you figure out what to do with it, or you can automate things. You can say, okay, if Google's spending more than $100 on a click, then we need to reel the automated bidding back in because maybe the product we're selling is only $60. So how does it ever make sense to spend $100 on that click? But if you're on automated bidding, that could very well happen. The things do go off the rails. And we have alerts and audits and all of those types of things to make sure that your money is spent sensibly. And we do all of that for a pretty affordable price compared to many of the other softwares.
And what's the optimal size of a marketing or an advertiser to use the product?
Yeah, I mean, so really, so sorry, it's usually not in terms of like the spend. It's more in terms of how many clicks and impressions and conversions you get. And just like Google says, you need somewhere between 30 and 50 conversions per month for automated bidding to do a really good job. Think about it the same way in terms of Optmyzr. And now these 30 to 50 conversions are spread between 100 campaigns. It just means it's going to be harder for us to pick up signal from the noise to make a good recommendation. So it's really about that conversion volume. Now, if you're in the legal field and you're spending $100 per click, that means you're going to need a pretty high budget. If you're in a CPG sort of a category, you can probably get a lot of data with much less spend.
Yeah. Well, we mostly deal with CPG companies. That's sort of our sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Consumer products, it has been. That's sort of how we grew up. Beauty, fashion, food. That's where. Although we do some SaaS products and we do some industrial, it's usually because of some relationship we have. But most of the time we deal with CPG. But we've looked at a lot of products over the years, and many, I think, overpromised and underdelivered. So I'd be interested in taking a look at it because
Well, we got good reviews. People seem to love us, and I'll be honest. I mean, I think sometimes the interface is a little bit harder to use, and so I think our sweet spot is someone who is a professional digital marketer who understands what it is they want to do, and they'll understand where to go in Optmyzr to do that. If you're more of a novice or a business owner looking for that silver bullet, like just fix it for me, well, we're still going to have good suggestions. We're still going to provide some usefulness, but it is going to be a little bit tougher for you to get the full use out of the tool. And we got an amazing support team, so they're happy to help you, point you in the right direction. But really, that sweet spot is for someone who's probably been doing digital marketing at least 2 years.
Well, I'll tell you that every single CEO, president, founder of every single CPG company is looking for the silver bullet all the time for marketing. It's funny. People, they think that there's something that they're missing. They can just hit the right switch and everything is going to flow. And you say, look, it's hard work. There's a lot of moving parts here, and a lot of things affect how your ads are. If your merchant center isn't set up correctly, and your search console and all these pieces and your site and everything, and they don't want to hear it because that's not, it's not a direct spend, right? If I say, well, these are the 5 things you have to do, and none of them are, I'm going to spend more money to get more ads. They don't want to hear it, because you say, look, you're trying to build a foundation to make your ads more successful. These need to be done. So,
And that needs to be done. And I think there needs to be a philosophy of experimentation and testing. And that's actually one of the things Optmyzr really enables. So I can't name the client, but we had a relatively large client who had a team of 17 people who were managing the product data feed and the shopping ads associated to that. And it's just a situation where hundreds of new products come into inventory every day. They need to be placed in the right categories, in the right ad groups, and the right markets. And then products go out of stock, so they need to be removed. So it was this huge, tremendous manual slog. We have a tool that automated that fully, and now these 17 people can actually do something useful. Not to say that it wasn't useful, right? But that's not what the human brain is best at. So now they can be deployed in a much more strategic fashion as true marketers.
yeah.
We have but again, what's nice is they could say we set up a structure this way, and tomorrow the CMO looks at it and is like, nah, I don't like it. It needs to be changed. Well, it's not going to take you 6 weeks to redo it. With Optmyzr, you just redefine how to lay stuff out, hit the button, and automatically an hour later, your campaign is rebuilt, and you can start experimenting with that new setup.
Wow, that sounds interesting. So we've got about 3 more minutes. But looking ahead, what do you think the next round of innovations is going to be, and what can we expect from Optmyzr? Obviously, you don't strike me as someone who sits on his laurels. I would imagine that you're constantly looking for ways to make Optmyzr better.
Yeah, absolutely. And so right now we are launching a social capabilities. So for advertisers on Insta, LinkedIn, and Meta, adding some Optmyzr capabilities around that. To spread budgets out across the various channels that you might be deploying, also to do reporting across all of those channels. Reporting is a pretty big pain point on social. A lot of that data disappears. We've got a really cool integration we launched with Amazon just today. So now you can build an Amazon account for non-endemic advertising on their display network. So you can get your local ads on Twitch, on Amazon Prime TV, on the Amazon network, and you have amazing audience signals. Like you can literally say, I want to show an ad to someone who's got a Jeep Wrangler and just bought a book to travel to Bali and likes a certain type of cereal they buy on Amazon. So amazing capabilities that launched today. So that's kind of the future. And then just bringing generative AI into the tool so that it can be your assistant and help you do things faster.
Yeah, that's great. I am going to check it out, because we have some tools, but I'm never satisfied. I always think that there's something better out there. Huh?
There's always more and better. And then honestly, the same with Optmyzr. Like, I wish we could do so many more things, and we keep building and building. And the customer feedback. So let us know what you think, and we love that customer feedback, and it's really what drives where we go next.
Yeah, that's it is something. Yeah, I think this whole business just continues to evolve, and I never get bored with it. I tell my wife, all the time. I say, it just every day I sort of learn something new, even if I'm not, just from the people that I have that are working with me, who we do a lot of social media, not only advertising, but we manage a lot of social media accounts. And I have, several young people that have their own social media accounts, whether it's TikTok or Reels, and they have, they do videos and get millions of followers. And whenever I have a question about something, they can sit there and explain it to me. I mean, I get it. I understand it. I don't personally know it, because I'm not in that world. I'm not creating, videos on TikTok every day, but they can explain it to me, and they understand how the algorithm works, and they understand what to do. And I find it fascinating. Every day I learn something new. Even today, this whole conversation for me has been exceptional. And so I enjoyed the conversation with you.
I did
like
too.
I said,
I enjoyed chatting with you.
you've been teaching me about PPC for, I don't know, 20 years, maybe 15. I don't know. It's been a long
So
time.
it continues. Okay, well, here's to another 20 years of hopefully staying relevant as humans and not being Sam Altman's 95% of marketers who don't have jobs in 5 years.
Yeah.
I hope we can do this again in 5 years and still be relevant.
So do I. Again, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time to do it. explaining to the audience what you do, and hopefully they'll all, read your books, watch your podcast, and watch and join up for Optmyzr.
Yeah. Thank you, Phil. Thanks
So,
for having me on, and thanks for
yeah.
watching, everyone.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I just have a couple of things to close up the show with, and you can stay in the green room if you want to, and then we can catch up after the show ends if you want.
Sounds good. I'll see you in a minute.
All right, thanks. So again, I don't mean to gush, right? But it's true. When when in the early days, when we were doing, just like Fred was explaining, things have continued to evolve. And in the early days, when we were advertising and marketing online, things were so much different, and things were changing, and Google was adding things, and you always had to go and find the expert who knew it, and we always gravitated towards those videos. So I really loved his approach, and I really loved what he was doing, and I thought it was great, and it taught me a lot. And again, you learn mostly from doing, right? And we've been and making mistakes. Believe me, we've spent and wasted a lot of money in different ways, and that's a whole different story. But along the way, it's evolved, and it's necessary, and you have to continue to get better at it. And every company out there, every CPG company, every company is doing some sort of advertising online, digitally. So these are the tools that you need. So I hope it was as good for you as it was for me. I thought it was interesting. I love that kind of conversation. And again, everybody who's out there starting a business is going to have to do PPC advertising or some sort of digital advertising. So here you've got some tools, some things to look at, and I'm interested in watching his podcast next week to understand this whole new event. So again, hey, thanks for tuning in. Next week we're talking about currency exchange. We have an entrepreneur on, started a new business about to deal with currency exchange, which you would think is just a business to business piece, but it's not, because there's so many students today leaving the country and going to different, whether it's Europe or whether it's South America or wherever, and parents need to have this whole mechanism to pay the student bills, and understanding currency exchange and understanding what's going to happen, and so to sort of smooth out those currency exchange bumps. So it'll be an interesting conversation next week too. So and I appreciate you stopping by, and as always, you can go to my site philmasiella.com, or you can go to crunchgrowth.com. We've got a couple of great tools to download for free, so join us there as well. And I appreciate you taking the time and joining us tonight. So thank you, and we'll see you next week.